So thank you, Walter, and colleagues at the WCC. And my name is Reverend Dr. Chad Rimmer. I am one of the program executives for theology at the Lutheran World Federation and was blessed to be asked to be the moderator of this event today, where we are gathered to launch this publication of essays presented at the 6th International Conference on Ecology, Theology, and Environmental Ethics, organized by the Institute of Theology and Ecology at the Orthodox Academy of Crete in 2019, under the auspices of His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I. This event gathered churches, representatives, interreligious organizations, interfaith friends, monasteries, representatives of environmental organizations, and academic institutes from across the world. And today we have gathered representatives of organizations also who have sponsored and edited this publication. And we will hear some short interventions also from our partners, as well as the authors and contributors, which we will invite to share some reflections around the three themes that have been curated in this book. But prior to this rich discussion, we want to open the space and the floor for a word of greeting from our hosts. And so now I would like to invite Mr. Antonis Kalogerakis, who is head of the Institute of Theology and Ecology at the Orthodox Academy of Crete, to both welcome us and to invite Dr. Zorbas with an opening word and introduce as well our featured speaker, Theodota Nansu from WWF Greece. So, Mr. Kalogerakis, over to you.
Chad, thank you so much. It's actually my pleasure to see all of you today here at this webinar hosted by WCC. We have to thank WCC for all his kind assistance and his kind work all these days, together with all the people who have contributed to the ECOTHEE. Unfortunately, the then General Director of the Orthodox Academy of Crete, Dr. Konstantinos Zorbas, cannot be with us right now because of some technical issues. However, I would like to read his message. His message is in Greek, so please, at the interpretation, put the English. And now we'll start with the message of Dr. Zorbas.
It is with great pleasure that we welcome you on behalf of His Eminence the Metropolitan of Kissamos and Selinou, Mr. Emphilou,
και όλων των συνεργατών της Ορθοδόξου Ακαδημίας Κρήτης στη σημερινή εκδήλωση με τη βοήθεια του Παγκοσμίου Συμβουλίου των Εκκλησιών με αφορμή την παρουσίαση του νέου έκτου τόμου των πρακτικών του
Academy, the presentation of the new 6th volume of the minutes of the conference on contemporary ecotheology, climate justice and environmental stewardship in world religions, curated by Lou Gondrianos and Tom Svertomren. We'd like to thank you all for contributing to this effort tonight through the presentations. I'd like to share a few thoughts, however. The COP26 of Glasgow, as you know, already ended with promises for environmental actions, which would supposedly curb the increase of temperatures to 1.5 degrees. But nobody believes this. As Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, said, 1.5 degrees is in fact something that will allow our planet to live, but on life support. We also heard other things by the Secretary General, and these were not referred to by the media. He referred to the mobilization of civil society. So it is reasonable that all people understand the real risks entailed in climate change. We see these daily around us, even in our house. We see the levels of consumption and the abuse of the natural world, the weather events, the oceans, and all living organizations that live in the natural environment. The UN Secretary General also mentioned the spiritual role of the religious leaders in this effort. And it reminds us that each and every one of us, irrespective of their beliefs and theory, the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, Pope Francis, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said that we are in fact before a harsh justice. The loss of biodiversity, the degradation of the environment, and climate change are in fact the consequences of our actions, because we have greedily consumed more resources than our planet can withstand. This is not simply a statement or reminder that is addressed to the faithful, but rather it is a political intervention, political theology, for those who should hear the cry of the earth and the people who are poor, to examine their behavior and to engage in substantial sacrifices for the sake of earth that was given to us by God. So towards this direction is also the work of the Orthodox Academy of Crete through the Institute of Theology and Ecology, with the efforts of Andon Kalakidakis, responsible for it, and we'd like to thank him. And with respect to the actions and good practices, he's going to talk about afterwards. And so this is, in fact, a tangible response to the various initiatives of our Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew for the protection of the natural environment. And he has been, for the last 30 years, at the head of the church and society. So, ladies and gentlemen, the churches have always had a difficulty to convey the decisions of the ecumenical meetings to the base. So this is also true in the ecological crisis. We have a wonderful theology, but here, in terms of practice, we find it difficult to apply the so-called green parish. We need, in fact, a change of standpoint. And it is, in fact, repentance, as we call it in our Orthodox tradition. And that means that children, but even older people who are protesting on the streets throughout the world, know that we cannot actually avoid shouldering this responsibility. It is time to take urgent and decisive action for our planet. The action for the climate is primarily for our children and the children that are to come. It's perhaps the predominant message of COP26 is that the discussion for this action has not come to an end. And those who are in power have understood the message that the churches have been, in fact, talking about for centuries with respect to, for decades, sorry, with respect to the climate. But I think that we should not set this initiative aside, because any such effort would be for the cowards and not for the churches. In my humble opinion, we have to face two large problems. How will ecological theology will become ecological practice in school, in the parish, in family, in society, in policy and politics? And how will we be able to tackle this major populism, which unfortunately is also very much present in climate change? So we need the evangelical message to actually reach society, transportation, it is high time for the and body actually missing link that exists between church and society. Once again, I'd like to congratulate all the organizers for this effort, the participants, and we'd like to invite you to the next meeting face-to-face in the conference center of the Orthodox Academy of Crete on October of 2022. Merry Christmas, and may we have a good and blessed New Year.
I'd like to thank you deeply for his message. Now we can continue, as we have the honor to have with us the head of policy of WWF Greece, Mrs. Theodota Nanciou. Mrs. Nanciou, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much for being here today for the presentation of the new book of the ECOTHEE.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always good to be in such panels. I have brought a few slides. I have put together a few slides in order, to visually aid an otherwise, I fear, boring discussion. I have a speech, so I hope that helps. I will be speaking about the climate crisis itself, because all of you in the panel, you are renowned theologians, and you know a lot better how the churches can best respond to this crisis. So it is a crisis. We used to be talking some years ago about climate change. We know that climate change changes everything. What scientists have been telling us all these years is that climate change will become a crisis after global warming reaches plus 1.5 degrees. So that means the temperature, the median temperature of the Earth increases by 1.5 degrees. This is when scientists have been telling us that we will reach the point of climate crisis. But we are in a climate crisis right now, before the threshold of 1.5 degrees. And this is sad, because this means that if we do not stop this crisis now, and that means if we do not achieve climate neutrality, if we do not cease emitting these greenhouse gases, as chemists call them, then we are reaching a point when chaos, climate chaos and climate disasters will be the new normality. And this is not something we want, because our planet will cease being inhabitable by humans and life on this planet as we know it. So this is a climate crisis. The average temperature has been steadily increasing, not in geological times, not in a, say, rhythm that allows all different forms of life on Earth to adapt. We are talking about very rapid changes that do not allow life and human societies and economic activities to adapt. So now we are already experiencing disasters, huge disasters that take a huge toll on all ends of this planet, take a huge toll on human lives, economic loss, and all that. So the climate crisis and stopping the climate crisis is a matter of life and death. It is an existential crisis for humanity. The bar on what climate crisis means is set by science. It is not what I, Theological, want to believe or feel or see or experience. It is a scientific fact, and it is really good that now there is very broad acceptance on all, say, segments of society, economic activity, economic actors, religions, the Orthodox Church, the World Council of Churches, governments. We all accept that the climate crisis is here, and it will stay and become worse and worse if we do not do something about it. What we are lagging behind in is action, effective, efficient action to really stop this crisis here. What I am showing to you in this slide is a very important piece of a huge scientific report that is published by the UN, the top global scientific body on climate change. It is comprised of all scientists, the best, say, scientists, climate scientists in the world. It is the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So you know that the IPCC, as it is called, publishes a huge report every now and then. This has been the most alarming report. A few years ago it was published, and it raised the flag that we need to absolutely stop global warming, the climate crisis at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Today, it appears scientists tell us that we are at 1.1. We are really, really, really close to this threshold. So what we need to do is simply stop emitting greenhouse gases. And that, unfortunately, covers, this is the most tricky part. This challenge, the challenge for climate neutrality, needs to change the whole aspect, or all aspects of humanity, all aspects of economy, the way we live in, everyday life, economic activities, everything. So this is just a slide that shows what most of us know, what the impact of the 1.5 degree scenario of global warming and the 2 degrees scenario of global warming, which appears to be more possible, means. We all know about that. We know about the impact on biodiversity, on human activities, wildfires. This is becoming wild and deadly in countries like Greece and the whole Mediterranean. Flash floods and loss of biodiversity. These are impacts that we are already seeing, and we have not reached 1.5 degrees yet. So climate change changes everything, and there is a huge role for religions. Religions need to be part of the solution. This is an expert, this is one part, one small piece of the IPCC report. So the scientists are calling for, say, a global awareness and global action, climate action by religions. And they also appear to be really concerned about how the framing on climate change will be presented by global religions. So what they say in this piece is that a huge challenge is how the understanding of the climate crisis is framed by faiths and religions. So this is a huge challenge, and the Orthodox Church, thankfully, has started addressing this this global crisis, the climate crisis, even before it became a crisis. So this is part of the first environmental message that was issued by the late Patriarch, Ecumenical Patriarch Demetrios. I think it was, 1989. And he was talking about global warming even before the world knew that the global, societies around the world knew that the planet was heating up. So what has happened since then? The Orthodox Church, especially the Ecumenical Patriarchate, has done numerous things like messages, like important conferences, and many conferences have been organized worldwide. The World Council of Churches have been doing a lot of good work. But the challenge that remains, and this is what is important to come up from conferences like today, there remains a huge gap between words, awareness, and action. Actual activities, actual practice, everyday practice. Antonis Kalogerakis talked about the huge challenge of green parishes. This remains a huge challenge. We know that the Orthodox Church appears to be really sensitive about the climate crisis and the whole crisis and loss of biodiversity, but the challenge remains. We need to put words into practice. So this is a book that is presented today, and I am really eager to read the lessons from different Christian communities. There's another book that we published some months ago, this year, jointly with the Volos Academy for Theological Studies. The Orthodox Academy of Crete have been doing great work since many years now, raising awareness and working with communities and installing solar panels. Antonis will tell us more about these good examples, but these need to become the normality for the Orthodox Church, not just in Greece, but for the whole Orthodox community in the Balkan Peninsula, for example, and the whole world. So clean energy, developing clean energy models, solar panels or wind or whatever, in church lands or monasteries, and using these to teach children and local communities how clean energy is produced and why it is important, and also addressing possibly energy poverty. This is an issue that is very close to the heart of church communities, addressing energy poverty while at the same time addressing the climate crisis, two crises together. Green parishes, it's not just energy that is a huge challenge in addressing the climate crisis, it's waste, it's the whole consumption model. So bringing people together in a global, in a community, in local communities that help address the environmental crisis that is undermining life on Earth is a huge challenge. And Orthodox churches especially need to put this into practice, raising awareness within the church communities and beyond. There is a lot that can be said by church leaders and parishioners and everyday practice. And of course, stimulating personal change. We all as persons, as individuals, have a very big, say, environmental and climate footprint. We need to address that. We need to reduce consumption. We need to love this planet. And we need to listen to the scientists who monitor the situation of the planet and be ready to adapt. So again, I would not like to, tire the audience with speaking more. I would love to hear what other speakers have to say. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Theodota, and thank you for reminding us that this call about this work of faith leaders and the perspective of our religious traditions needs to become the norm. And I think we have a room full of people here today who are happy to join that call. And so now we will shift into hearing a word of introduction and welcome from those representatives of the organizations who have sponsored, curated, and helped to edit this publication, Contemporary Ecotheology, Climate Justice, and Environmental Stewardship in World Religions, which is this volume of ECOTHEE that we're launching today. And so as we move into this section, I'll just remind again for those participants that have joined us that you can choose the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen to follow either the English or the Greek, which is actually on the Portuguese channel. So just another reminder for those who need translation. And so now, friends, as I mentioned, we're happy to shift into this moment. I'll invite and introduce each of the representatives from our partner organizations for a few minutes to introduce themselves and to share a brief word of welcome from the organization that you represent, and as well a word about what it means for your organization to be participating in this project. And so the first of our friends that I want to invite is Dr. Lou Gondrianos, who is formerly responsible for the Institute of Theology and Ecology at the Orthodox Academy of Crete, and he is representing the World Council of Churches Economic and Ecological Justice team, which we are grateful, among other things, for supporting and both financially and technically this webinar here together. So, Luke, we invite you to take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Reverend Chad, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar book launch, which is kind of a dream for us when we had the conference 2 years ago, because the times were so difficult that we didn't know even if we will be alive in this 2021. I just want to thank our God, creator of all, for giving us this grace and this great opportunity to see our faces one another, and to allow this, I would say, great resource that we will pass on to the generation, and this great message through this book about the need for caring the creation of God and take care about the call of the creation to unite all the humanity to do this work. The World Council of Churches has the theme of ecological and economic justice, like a department to try to unite all the churches in prayer and action to care for the creation. And one of its task is to support such initiative in local churches, to gather the believers and to do something to promote theology, ecotheology, especially for this important work. So just maybe I forgot to present myself. I was born in Madagascar, and I had the opportunity to study in Greece, and then I got married in Greece, and I worked at the Orthodox Academy of Crete before Andonis Kalogerakis has did also after me to lead the Institute of Theology and Ecology. And it was in 2008 that we started this ECOTHEE gathering and the project of producing academic books on ecotheology. So one of the main tasks is especially to strengthen the churches and also the academic schools to have knowledge and spiritual background on how or what is ecotheology. So the beginning was to combine religion and science. At that time, it was difficult to convince scientists to take part in a theological discussion, and the opposite, to convince theologians to talk with scientists. But slowly we managed, and we could schedule a biannual gathering of scientists and theologians and all the stakeholders of the society to talk and to discuss on ecotheology issues. So I want to share very few photos of how we began to start the ECOTHEE. With this poster of the 6th International Conference on Ecological and Environment, December 23rd, 26th, 2019. And the ECOTHEE, this ECOTHEE was the 6th after the first that was held in 2008. That this was the flyer at that time. Among the conference goals was to produce exactly a book or proceedings which will gather all the articles and all the best practices all around the world on caring for creation. And at that time, this was the book ECOTHEE First, published in 2008. And here I just want to mention that it was a work of a great team and lots of people from all over the globe. And at that time, we started to understand that this work can be done only through ecumenical and interfaith collaborations between all, as I told before, all the stakeholders of the society, especially the scientists and the theologians. So this ECOTHEE 6 also is the continuation of this, I would say, vision and inspiration from our great leaders at the Orthodox Academy of Crete at that time in 2008. You can see here photos of Dr. Papaderos, who was one of the founder of the Orthodox Academy of Crete, with his Holiness Bartholomew and late Bishop Irenaeus, the founder also of Orthodox Academy. So here I just want to give a credit and to thank them for this vision, because this book is exactly the fruit of their vision, and also the this work is part of their inspiration that we just continue. Also, the ECOTHEE is mainly, I would say, 50% science research, scientific book, because since the beginning, we had the support from the Foundation for Research and Technology, ELAS, where the Institute of Molecular Biology and Biotechnology has supported this conference and this book initiative through the Professor Kafatos Fotis and Professor Nikos Tavernarakis, very well known in Europe from their researches. And here I'm glad to see that we can enjoy, and we still have many scientists in this ECOTHEE family, I would say. So just there's small photos from our ECOTHEE gatherings to remind you that this is a work team, and the ECOTHEE book is kind of a very nice celebration of our common collaboration. Thank you very much, and I will hand it over to you, Chad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke. And of course, that collaboration is hosted by the Orthodox Academy of Crete. And so it's a joy now to welcome back, this time as one of the supporters and contributors, Mr. Antonis Kalogerakis, to share from his perspective as now the current head of the Institute of Theology and Ecology at the Orthodox Academy of Crete.
Thank you once again very much, Chad. I would like to use the time that I have to show you some good practices that we have here at the Orthodox Academy of Crete. I hope that you can see my presentation. The first thing is, of course, the ECOTHEE is part of our life through the years. As Luke has just mentioned, the first ECOTHEE started in 2008. These are the books actually published by the ECOTHEE, and then we continued in 2011, the second volume, 2013, third ECOTHEE, the fourth ECOTHEE back in 2015, then in 2017. Actually, it was published, the papers were published at the Ecumenical Review of the WCC, and now we have the sixth, and we're very happy to organize also the next ECOTHEE conferences, as we consider them as very important for both the science community and the theologian community, to bring them together. Also, we have made here at the Academy as a good practice publications for our awareness. This is the publication actually which is included at the last book of ECOTHEE. Together with Dr. Mirai Yazgant and me, we have discussed about the ecotheological analysis with philosophical engineering approach. Also, this article mentions about our responsibility as Christians for the climate crisis. Also, we have mentioned and we have made papers about the European Green Deal, sustainability assessment, how to offset carbon emissions, which is a critical issue nowadays. And of course, we have the photovoltaic project here at the Orthodox Academy of Crete. It was materialized back in 2017 as a lighthouse. We consider it as a lighthouse to have more examples in our everyday life students, pupils, professors are coming, and we have fruitful discussions about how to make this energy transition. Energy democracy and social engagement through the energy community is very important for us. We have two very good examples. The first is a church of Saint Nikiforos the Leper, which is here at Kissamos. It was the first energy autonomous parish back in 2018. And we have the blessing, the opening of the church to be take place by the Ecumenical Patriarch himself. And also back in 2019, one more church with the support of the Orthodox Academy of Crete, St. Georgios Church at the Castelli. They have also started to become a sustainable community by using the photovoltaics. Also a number of workshops, face-to-face workshops that we have done starting in 2014 concerning the energy, the Energy Future Energy Cooperative, also online events the last 2 years. Also, one more good practice was the pilot project that we have run here at the Academy, the utilization of burning residues for energy production and enrichment of soil, together with the cooperation of municipality of Platanias, which supports also today's event. Our Academy Museum of Cretan Herbs, the Herbarium Jacques Zafran, a very important work that has begun by the professor Jacques Zafran, and he has started this work back in the 1960s. And now we have pupils coming and discussing about the treasure that we have of the herbs, and we have to reconsider all the plants and that we have in our everyday life, and we have to make them as part of our routine, the herbs and the plants that we have in our countries. Health and religion also, it's very important, especially nowadays we have seen the connection with the coronavirus crisis. This is a project that we run now at the Academy, training religion as a lever towards mental and physical health. Educational programs, we run special programs together with pupils as an interactive experimental paper recycling laboratory with introduction to renewable energy sources and sustainable resources management, together with this model of helicopter with photovoltaics. The pupils themselves do this recycling procedure. So at the end of the day, they have their own paper, recycled paper in their own hands. This is very important for them. Also, tree planting events, compost, also producing natural plant nutrients is very important. Gastronomy is part of our life. This is the book that we have published here at the Academy, Cooking at the WAC, based on organic philosophy, organic principles, and then move these organic principles to our plates, to our food. This is very important. Also the walks at the nature. At the Academy, we have a natural stone pathways in order to connect the view of the Cretan Sea together with the mountain, but also with a way friendly to the environment. Students, pupils come and also have the chance to admire these mosaics from our Christian tradition in order to be able to understand the importance of respecting the environment. Last but not least is the dialogue of new technologies, how to use this example of drones, how to use a drone in order to support the organic farming, and also the sustainable transport. This is also one more part of the energy transition, how to support also mass transportation with the buses by using photovoltaics even in cars. As a conclusion, the theology teaches the respect to the natural environment, but we have the duty to take actions. The Orthodox Academy of Crete works for just a sustainable future for everyone, and I believe that this philosophy has to be adapted by everyone. Thank you so much, Chad. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kalogerakis. And you are reminding us all and stirring our hearts and in hope for the next time that we can be in person and together for the next ECOTHEE conference at OAC, God willing. Thank you so much. And now it's our joy to invite Peter Pavlovich, who is representing the Conference of European Churches, where he is head of the European Christian Environmental Network. And so we invite Peter. Welcome.
Thank you, Chad. It is indeed my pleasure to be here. I will speak today on behalf of European Christian Environmental Network, which is a network of Christians from all over continent, persons from different church traditions, Orthodox, Protestant, Anglican, Catholics, united by our concerns in care for creation and our conviction that church and our faith, they have something to say to current environmental crisis. We are very thankful to Orthodox Academy in Crete for hosting the conference. And I would like to share with you the following. In the Orthodox Academy of Crete, one can find displayed at the prominent place a remarkable text. Based on the ancient story of Saint Macarius of Egypt, the 4th century ascetic of desert, it goes as follows. One day, Abba Macarius came across a school in the desert. The following dialogue took place. Macarius asked, "Who are you?" And school responded, "I was a priest of the pagans, and you are Macarius. When you pray for us who are in hell, we are consoled. And you are Macarius, the bearer of the Spirit. When you have pity on the doomed and pray for them, they are consoled." And Macarius then asked, "What kind of consolation do you feel? What it is like in hell?" And school responds, "We stand in flames which reach up to the sky, and we cannot see each other because we are tied back to back. But when you pray for us, the ropes become loose, and we can see each other again face to face. And this is the consolation." This dialogue between the saint and the school is a compelling expression of the difficulty of human beings to communicate with the other, the fellow human being. Plautus once stated, "Homo homini lupus," man is a wolf for man. And Jean-Paul Sartre put it in even more tragic manner, saying, "L'enfer, c'est les autres," hell is the other people. By contrast, Macarius' text summarizes the Christian belief that hell is not the presence of the other, but the absence of the other, the lack of communication. And I believe that the story of Macarius communicates an important message, even for us in 21st century, and focusing on our attention on environment and climate change. Notably, that care for environment and response to climate change cannot and must not be reduced to technocratic and scientific agenda. Climate change and care for environment is at the same time, and first of all, the relational issue. Addressing it means addressing our relationship to the world around and our relationship to people around. And this is precisely why the conference in the Orthodox Academy in Crete wanted to highlight. And this is why a group of church-related agencies, including European Christian Environmental Network, have been sponsoring the event and contributing to it. We believe that readers will find articles and stories shared in the conference relevant in your respective concerns with climate change and environment in whatever part of the world you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And now it is our joy to welcome to the floor Dr. Tom Svertomren, who is teaching at the University of Applied Science in Western Norway, and a great colleague and friend who has also contributed an article, a couple pieces to this book, including an article on the environmental work of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Cameroon, among others. So, Tom, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Good to see you all. First of all, I will express my gratitude because this has been a great privilege to work with you all. As many of you know, I've been pulling the strings behind these books, and it's been a big job. 23 different people from all over the world, and try to get integrated and get dialogue with small pieces that people want to change and people want to correct and have it the best way as possible. Well, finally, we finished the job as best as we could with good help for the editors. And I would really like to thank you all, which has been co-editors and which has been correcting the language, the English language. None of this could have been done by Luke and me alone. We really needed all of you. In the end, I would like to say, I think this work is important for the churches, of course, for us as Christians individual, for me as an environmental activist, but also for the academical sector, which I am representing nowadays. As you might know, I am associated professor at the Western Norway University of Applied Science. And in the academical sector, in religious studies, the question of which role does the religion play, it's become quite a big question, important question in the curriculums. When we're going to develop new curriculums for ordinary teaching in public schools and private schools, this question is raised. So suddenly, after many years as an academical ecological activists, being a little bit out on the, what can you say, not in the center of everything, suddenly I feel that this thing which I've been puzzling with over many years suddenly people is interested. It's an important question. And I think we have to acknowledge that we know is playing a big and important role in the society, not only in the churches, but also in developing the curriculum for the public in teaching. Looking forward to the rest of the discussions and looking forward to present my articles to you.
Yes, thank you, Tom. And we'll just say a general word of thanks, special thanks to you and to Luke and to you for being our anchor as the editor and the driver for really pulling this publication together. So many thanks and gratitude. And now it will turn to me to share just a brief word, to step out of my role as moderator for a second, to bring a greetings from the Lutheran World Federation, who's also a proud sponsor and partner in this publication. The LWF is committed in this way to advocating for climate justice and to working to equip our member churches to care for creation around the Lutheran communion. And the LWF sustains this work by promoting a faithful ecological sense of being human and a creation-oriented spirituality that shapes the way that we worship and live out our Lutheran tradition for the well-being and the care for all of creation. From our perspective, the word ecotheology describes an ecological way to both read the word and to understand our experiences in the world, which maintains a focus on the integral relationship between the earth and her natural systems, the diversity and well-being of all species, and the sustainability of our just and right economic, political, social, and ecological relationships. So as humans who are called to cultivate and safeguard creation that we hear in the second chapter of Genesis, and discern together the spiritual and ethical ways to promote just right relationships throughout this web of life. And that web, we profess, of course, is created by God, and we're called to safeguard its integrity. So the loss of biodiversity that Theodota was speaking out in the beginning is the cause of so many social, economic, and political injustices that lead to wide-ranging humanitarian crises that we're facing today. And the poor and marginalized who depend most immediately on the health of ecosystems are then often most affected, most severely, by the collapse of natural systems that sustain our life and societies. So biodiversity from our perspective also matters because each of God's creatures has value in itself, and maintaining diversity in right relationships of mutuality is key to sustaining the health of ecosystems and societies. We know that that's God's wisdom woven into the fabric of creation. And so from our perspective, we're so happy to join in this project because it represents our goal of ecotheological exploration, as Tom pointed to apply these lenses to the way we read the Bible, practice our faith, live out our ethics, and express this good news to all creation that's at the heart of our tradition, which includes a rich ecumenical interfaith, and interdisciplinary commitment to join hands in this shared call. So for that reason, on behalf of the LWF, we're grateful to be a partner in this ECOTHEE project. And with that, we'll invite our last representative of the sponsor organization, Professor Hans Morton Haugen, to bring a word of greeting this time on from the perspective of the Church of Norway. Welcome, Hans Morton.
Yes, and I can also represent actually VID Specialized University, where I'm working. I'm working as Professor of International Diaconia. And VID is a specialized university, which means that we have university level, particularly in our faculty of Theology, Diaconia, and Leadership Studies. And we have a master's in Community Development and Social Innovation. We have in VID, we have been adopted this year strategy on sustainability, and just last week the board actually approved a strategy where I, as the leader of the largest trade union, was criticizing the draft of the strategy for being too anthropocentric, and we succeeded in having a stronger wording on the ecocentric dimensions. Which is not in itself creating a lot of change just by that, but it at least indicated some willingness to go wider than merely the social dimension of sustainability, to encompass the ecological much more than was the situation of the draft. I'll talk a little bit more about Church of Norway after when I present my own chapter. But like I said, we are independent, but we do teach theology and diaconia studies, most of whom are working in Church of Norway, which is the majority church in Norway, with approximately 78% of the population as members. And we are together with other theological institutes, I would say more and more engaged in ecotheology issues. Myself, I'm not a theologian, I'm a political scientist with a PhD in law. But we can say that there are various actors in Norway who are working towards this, and to some extent to the frustration and criticism of several actors in Norway, whom I will come back to in my latter presentation later today. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Hans Morton. And now, yes, to move from our partners to the content of the book itself. As I mentioned, the book is curated under three themes: theological and philosophical reflections, ethics and best practices, and global contributions. And so we want to take a few minutes for some of these invited authors to share some of their thoughts on their contribution in each of these areas. So first, we welcome authors who contributed to the section on theological and philosophical reflection. And we'll begin with Lesa Sabada, who is coming to us from Canada, and she can speak to us now about her contribution, The God of Both Squirrels and Men, a challenge to Lynn White's thesis. So Lesa, over to you. And if you can, please unmute yourself too. There we go.
Can you hear me now? Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to express that when I see you all, I get really homesick. I know the OAC is, and all the work they do, and being myself from the Eastern Church is so near and dear to my heart. And I really appreciate everything that has been done by the OAC. Lucas, right from the beginning in 2008, you started these wonderful conferences, and Linda was there, and we had long time friendships. And I really wanted to thank especially Tom. Oh my gosh, I don't know of a man who is so professional and who responded so quickly to my emails and concerns. And it was such a huge amount of work on myself. I'm an academic, I'm a theologian also. So I wanted to express Tom and Lucas, just the tremendous amount of work you're doing. And I wanted to let everyone know how much I appreciate it. Just I wanted to say, being in the area of religion, and particularly a theologian from the Eastern Church, I find myself concerned about my own bias to the church. I strongly love the Eastern Church. And I wanted to just share with you that when I was writing my articles, and I'm very aware of how I think, and I don't want to ever exclude anyone. The Helke Summit that happened in the fourth one last year, it was on climate change and impact on nature. I listened to it, I joined it and I listened, and particularly of importance was Dr. Mary Evelyn Tucker, who is the co-founder and co-director of the Forum on Religion. She also is from Yale, the Yale School of the Environment, very well established and respected. And when I listened to her and she was talking about the Eastern Church, I want to take the quote here. And she says, this tradition, perhaps more than any other Christian tradition, has held at its heart the sacredness of earth. This is a cosmic temple, and we are living icons. Eastern theologians have brought this forward in so many ways. So I find my role that I play with that as an Eastern Christian theologian very vital and very, very important. I just also wanted to mention that I think it was in 2008 or something, under the leadership of Linda Turner, she put on a conference in Vancouver. Remember, Lucas and Linda, when we were in Vancouver and we had the opportunity to listen to one of a very important feminist who has since died, Dr. Sally McFaig. And when I spoke to her personally at that conference, I asked Sally, could you please share with me, with all your scholarship, what is happening in terms of the worldviews? Which worldviews really need to be brought up forward to the light to help us overcome some of these challenges? And without a blink of an eye, she said the Orthodox Church. So I just wanted to share that with the people for everyone to understand the importance of the leadership under the OAC, the Patriarch Bartholomew. It is just so vital that we understand this Christian tradition that is patristic and very biblical. And the deeper I do my own personal study and research in there, the more I am enriched. So right now I'm writing research about the animal kingdom. You mentioned, Chad, how important it is that we not only be concerned about the climate problem, but the loss of biodiversity. If we tap into those deep sources of the great fathers and mothers of the church, it is unbelievable the prayers that I'm finding by people like Saint Basil the Great, who is asking forgiveness from God for the human beings and the way we treat animals. And I think, oh my goodness, this was how many centuries ago? So we have it all. And this tradition belongs to everyone. It belongs to everyone. And I invite you to, if you have time in your very busy lives, to look at it, study it, and love it. And that's all I have to say. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And God bless OAC and Tom and Lucas particularly for your tremendous work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lesia. And your chapter really pointed also to the way that we're living. These traditions live with our text and form us, and we form it. And thank you for pointing to those anthropocentrisms and the dualisms that you really take on in your piece. And I really appreciate that. And you've called attention also in your sharing now to those women who are focused on this interconnectedness. And we had invited Nadia Furlan-Stante from Slovenia to speak, and I'm afraid she's not able. I don't see her on the list here. If you're here, Nadia, you can certainly signal to us. We'd love to hear but to make that connection to her contribution on eco-peace, building for women's interreligious action, which is a great partner to your contribution as well. But now we'll go to Jose Cardoso Duarte to come to us and share a few words on his contribution, Laudato Si encyclical, Entropy, Life, and the Revelation of John. So welcome, Jose.
Okay, thank you, Chad. In the few minutes that I was asked to speak, I will address a specific point only about the word and concept that for me is most difficult to understand and to define. That is exactly the word ecotheology. I intend to show that in the end, it has to do with the paper that I wrote for the book that brings us together today on this workshop. The word ecotheology, it is present on the title of the book, and it is even the first word on the title, although linked with the adjective contemporary that I will disregard. Ecotheology is evidently a composite word of at least two other words, eco and theology. We may also assume that eco refers implicitly to ecology, and therefore ecotheology could be understood as a symbiosis of two sciences, to know ecology and theology. Let me concentrate on what looks the intention behind the ecotheology word, that is to put together in contact two different kinds of phenomena, or even better, two different realities. Effectively, and not pretending to be a linguistic or an expert of the hermeneutics of language, and even confessing my ignorance of Greek and Latin, we all know that eco derives from the Greek word oiko, means the house or household. Concerning the word theo, we know that it refers to God or divine. And then the suffix logi, it refers to the study of the nature and properties of God, that is the divine world. Having in mind these definitions, we can now go directly to what concerns me here. How is it possible to merge these two words and worlds, eco and theo, each of one making reference to an homogeneous objective, but which are of completely heterogeneous and of divergent nature? Eco referring to the physical, natural world, and theo addressing the divine world, or as normally referred, the spiritual world, and in a larger sense, the invisible world. How can we merge the natural, visible world with the invisible spiritual word of God? Is there a way of connecting these two worlds, like a kind of quantic channeling between two different worlds, or are they definitely apart from each other? In my paper on the book, I found this difficulty, a difficulty that is present in almost all works dealing with this subject, and even on the Laudato Si encyclica. To try to approach this difficulty, I have resorted to the life phenomenology of the French philosopher and phenomenologist Michel Henry, which tried to bring together these two heterogeneous worlds. Henry used the phenomenological reduction as the basis for approaching the problem, addressing the fundamental question of the coming for existence as primordial to existing or being, the appearing rather than what appears, the manifestation rather than what is manifest. In a series of reductions at the end, Henry arrives to a reversal of material phenomenology and to the concept of life as what appears to itself, an invisible life that has nothing to do with the life of biological processes. Where can we find these two worlds merged together? In the prologue of John, that writes, "And the Word became flesh and took up residence among us. And we saw his glory, glory as of the one and only from the Father, full of grace and truth." Versicle 14 from the first chapter of John. Apparently, the incarnation of the Word, the Verb of God, presents us with the same difficulty of the intersection of those two worlds. We call it the mystery of Christmas. This mystery was the cornerstone of the Christian faith, since the first fathers of the emerging church started to think about it. And it became even source of many heresies and dissidences. But it also became a cornerstone for the last development of Michel's Henry phenomenology of life. I can't go further on this, but I hope to develop it on my next paper with further clarification of this concept of that brings us all here today, the concept of ecotheology. So thank you so much for your support, and have you all a nice and happy Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
And our collective gratitude to you, Jose. Thank you. And thank you for pointing us to that day when we look forward to your next paper that takes us deeper into this when we're all together again. And for these contributions and others in this section, we thank you for really pointing us to the importance of the dialogue between theology and the philosophy of science when we are at a time when we're, of course, seeking technocratic solutions to mitigate climate change. You're pointing us to this need of the metanoia, the change in perspective and philosophy and heart to sustain this work that needs to be done. So thank you both. And with that, we'll turn to the second group of three authors who contributed to this section on ethics and best practices, which is really a great interdisciplinary as well as interfaith approach to this question. And so first we want to welcome Syed Masood Nouri, who was contributing a co-authored piece entitled Climate Apartheid and the Role of Religious Leaders and Institutions in Combating It. So Dr. Nouri, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to be here and say thank you for editors and the people behind the scene of this successful project. In this short speech, but significant opportunity, I would like to talk about the importance of this book project and seminar interface eco-theological cooperation. Let me start by giving you some information about mosques, a great opportunity in Muslim society, in Muslim world. Maybe you know that mosque worldwide has been risen nearly 4 million by 2019. 4 million mosques around the world. For example, as some case studies in Iran, there are 70,000 mosques and 300 churches, of course. In Egypt, for example, we have more than 100 mosques. And maybe interesting that in India, there are more than 300,000, yes, 300,000 active mosques, which is more than most Muslim nations. Of course, unfortunately, there is no researchers. Maybe it's very difficult to do that, to know what percentages of the imams of these mosques, for example, in Friday prayer sermons or in the holy months of Ramadan, which are a lot of programs, they are talking with different issue with people. But I don't know how percentage of those sermons or those imams talk about, for example, environmental justice, climate apartheid, environmental refugees, and some issues like that. Of course, in some Muslim institution and Muslim leaders, they are sensitive and active to make green mosques or green Hajj, environmentally friendly activities. But of course, the number of these activities in Muslim world is not enough because of the huge problem that we have. So I want to ask you to think more and doing more activity about making some interfaith dialogue between Christian world, which is the most believers around the world, and the Muslim, the second rank. Let me testify that something. Since 2015, I practiced in some of conferences made by and organized by Crete Orthodox Academic, and one time in Norway. And all times I participate as a Muslim and bring some ideas from Islamic tradition, and always they welcome and accept me and let me talk about this issue. I want to say that you already have these activities, but I want to ask you be more active in this issue. We need to more interface dialogue and practice, and hopefully we can do that more and more together. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Tom, for your patience during this book project. We know that is very difficult, but fortunately you have done successfully. Thank you so much. And hopefully see you in the near future, face-to-face, anywhere around the world. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you, Dr. Nouri, for being constantly willing and just inspired to be one of those that's really driving this interfaith as well as interdisciplinary conversation. So we thank you so much for this and look forward to the next opportunity as well. And we will invite now David Larrabee, who will speak a brief word about his contribution, Who Owns the Air? Ethical Allocations of a Limited Resource. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Chad. Well, ECOTHEE represented for me an opportunity for the discussion amongst a wide variety of relevant disciplines. I'm a retired physicist with some theological training, so I'm really grateful for this community and the opportunity to contribute. Thank you, Lucas, and the rest of you, for your hospitality, your grace, and your support. My contribution addresses the question of the ethical division of the remaining greenhouse gas emissions among countries. Our current strategy is for voluntary reductions, and this is proving quite inadequate. The transition to a fossil-free world can either be an opportunity to help those in need or to continue policies that maintain global inequalities. Ethically, we should be giving preference to those most in need. This involves having the highest emitters reduce the emissions rapidly to give the lowest emitters what I'll call atmospheric space during the transition. The atmosphere is a shared resource that has been abused by the developed countries. The majority world faces the prospect of developing while at the same time transitioning to a sustainable economy. This brings both benefits and challenges. One ethical requirement is that during the transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to an economy using sustainable energy resources is that the inequality in CO2 emissions should also transition to zero. Let me put that another way. The developed countries need to make atmospheric room for the rest of the world, especially those who currently experience energy poverty. Energy policy is often marked by very low CO2 emissions. Now, we can actually measure the inequality numerically with something called the Lorenz curve that gives us both illustrates and gives us quantifies the emissions in CO2. It allows us to see what happens to the inequality under various allocation schemes. For the details, I'll refer you to my contribution. But in summary of what I've been investigating, I'll talk briefly about two strategies. So the United States is likely and has pursuing a strategy that involves some kind of what I'll call grandfathering. That is, the using existing emissions as a baseline and then judging your emissions off of that baseline. If we are to meet even a 2 degree C goal, this would force countries with lower emissions per capita to pursue greenhouse gas emissions prematurely, and thereby negatively impacting the ability of less developed countries to achieve the sustainable development goals the UN has suggested on a timely basis. This path also results in an increasing inequality in CO2 emissions, all the way to zero. So the inequality gets worse and worse and worse. Another strategy of capping the CO2 emissions on a per capita basis makes ethical sense. That is the base, what you look at is how many emissions per capita in the country and use that as the guideline to try to reduce it. This gives preference for the least responsible for climate change. This path would reduce the inequality as the world transitions to a sustainable energy usage. But this would require extremely fast reductions in the carbon emissions per capita in the United States, as well as some of the other developed countries. Speaking from a US perspective, the recent reactions to simple mask restrictions and vaccine mandates in the United States suggest that such a reaction in the United States would be met with a lot of opposition. So I'm not real hopeful that those kind of reductions are going to be made in making space for the poor. So the outlook for ethical conduct with respect to voluntary reductions, at least among the developed world, I think is not good. And I'm hoping that the church can provide some level of addressing these kind of issues to society as a whole. So with that, thank you, Chad, for the opportunity to talk about my work, and thank you for the ECOTHEE for providing this opportunity.
And we thank you, David, and especially for this contribution that really draws everyone's attention to these strategies that focus, especially this balance of justice between high emitters and least developed countries. It points us to that call for common but differentiated responsibility. So I really appreciate this, and your call to churches to take up this dialogue is actually at the heart of our next and last presenter in this group, which will bring back Morton Haugen from VEED, because it's a question of how the Church of Norway's public communication on environmental ethics is viewed by Norwegian leaders. So over to you, Morton.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to speak again, and thank you to David for this invitation. My background is that I've been working with environmental issues for 25 years, first in Church in Norway, and since 2004 I was chairing the Green Church Resource Group in the Diocese of Oslo, and I've also been chairing the association on the Norwegian environmental provision in the Norwegian Constitution, section 112, which is probably the best constitutional provision on environmental issues, as far as I'm concerned. That constitutional provision has been a basis for suing Norwegian authorities for opening up new areas for oil extraction, oil and gas extraction in the far north, in the Barents Sea. But now I'm speaking as a researcher, and my research is based on 18 interviews and using survey or questionnaires among 18 leaders in Norway, 6 being leaders in Church of Norway, and 12 being leaders in 3 different realms, 5 being youth party leaders. The 5 are from the biggest parties, you can say, 4 from the business side and 1 trade union member, and 3 from the environmental organization's leadership. And my data collection was done just before the Corona lockdown in the winter of 2020. And I kind of had 3 topics in common for all the 18 informants, which were on giving them the titles of Church of Norway decisions in the Bishops' Conference, as well as the Synod of Church of Norway for the last approximately 20 years, asking them about how they viewed the titles of these decisions. The second one was that I was giving them 11 concepts which are either introduced or used by Church of Norway, as well as a concept that was actually not used much by Church of Norway, but by the Norwegian Church AIDS youth organization, Changemaker. And I asked also these 18 persons about how they viewed these concepts. And then I had a third common round of questions, which were about giving them statements about land, water, air and fire or energy, as well as biosphere and the planet, with negative and positive elements to each statement, asking them about how they viewed the various statements. And then for Church of Norway informants, I had 6 Bible verses, and not all of them very much known, but asking them about how they viewed and how they were familiar with those Bible verses that related to creation care in some way or another. Very briefly, my findings were that there were quite positive perceptions among informants about the titles and also about the concepts, actually. I found, for instance, that the term stewardship and the term green church, those 2 terms or concepts, were very positively viewed by the non-church informants. The concepts which were more positively viewed by the church informants were climate pilgrim and climate justice. They had better scores among the church informants. And when I tried to explain why the non-church informants had higher scores on, for instance, stewardship, I think the reason is that that concept is quite possible to adapt to various contexts and not preventing exploitation of resources, but rather the use of resources for the benefit of humankind. And hence it is a concept that has been kind of used by business and trade union persons alike for justifying a continued Norwegian oil exploration and exploitation. However, there was some findings which were kind of in a way more worrying for Church of Norway, that Church of Norway's climate involvement was not very much known. And this was done in the winter of 2020. And this autumn in 2021, at the Synod of Church of Norway, there was a decision. I think there were approximately 15 votes against and some 100 plus votes for. A decision that was it was a decision in many topics, addressed many topics, but one of the sentences of the decision was about listening to the UN climate change panel and to halt the permission to explore new oil drilling sources. So not the full stop immediately, but kind of the ending of new permissions. And that has been quite much fuss since that decision was made. One can discuss whether it is wise or not wise for a church to give such specific policy advice, but it was done by the clear majority in Church of Norway. And maybe at least now, those persons who are not familiar with Church of Norway's climate policy are now more informed, at least, that the Church of Norway has quite bold positions. There was also, just to wind up, there was also criticism from some of the business.
And let's see, we may have lost Hans Morton and his connection. And if that's so, we're sorry for that, but want to thank Hans Morton again for his contribution. And for this three as a group, Dr. Nouri, Larrabee, and Hans Morton Haugen for, oh yes, coming back in. But we thank you for these contributions that remind us of the need to deepen this ethical link between these different sectors, human rights, theology, and the applied sciences, even to move public perception and move this conversation among our communities of faith. So we thank you for that. Friends, just a brief bit of housekeeping to say it looks like we'll go about 10 minutes over, I think, if we can beg your grace in that regard, because this is so rich, and we want to make sure that we leave a few minutes now for this last two contributors that made contributions in the area of global church. And so we will begin with the contribution from Edouard Domen on his piece, Love Creation as Yourself. So Edouard, you are welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, my contribution started also from Lynn White's statement that Christianity was the most anthropocentric religion the world has ever seen. And it takes an interreligious approach, looks at the attitude of other religions towards creation beyond humanity, and finds them more moderate, like Islam, or positively on quite another more inclusive track. So that is the theme of my book. I might at this point out that the book was the meeting was held a few months after a book came out, of which I am the author, which was in French. And it's very interesting and rather worrying that French and English have different approaches, even in theology, to many of these questions, and words take on different meanings. But also the good news is that there have been breakthroughs on the Christian front. Laudato Si, which has often been mentioned this evening, was a major breakthrough, and my contribution was structured around Laudato Si. The first part is, it's one of the chapters in Laudato Si, is a sublime communion. And I'm delighted to see on the website of the World Communion of Reformed Churches today that they are looking very much at communion and the way in which it can also embrace creation beyond humanity alone. And the second chapter of Laudato Si was headed A Terrible Responsibility. The word terrible is in the French version. I think it's tremendous in English. The point here is that humanity has an enormous capacity to do harm, and that we therefore have a tremendous responsibility to not use that power. Now, I then go on to show how many international conventions are, in fact, easily extendable beyond humanity to the rest of creation. And the key example is in the very definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development is defined in English as overriding priority to the needs of the poor. Now, poverty is a human concept, it's a social concept. In French, the definition says overriding priority to the needs of the defenseless. Now, all sorts of parts of creation are defenseless against the inroads of humanity, and therefore it can easily be extended beyond mere humanity to the rest of creation. And I think it certainly ought to be. There are a number of other principles. There are principles of ecological management, and I mentioned just briefly the principle of precaution, the principle of prevention or prudence, which say, roughly speaking, if you don't know what the consequences of what you're going to do are, you better find out before you do them. And that applies very much to the damage we are doing to the environment. And the prime example nowadays is, of course, global warming, which is a consequence of what we didn't think about when we started it off. Then very important is the principle of subsidiarity. The principle of subsidiarity can be tracked back to Calvin, in fact, who talked about our need to come to the help of those who are precisely defenseless. That also, Calvin clearly had a very human approach to subsidiarity, but it can certainly apply also to governing our conduct with respect to the rest of creation. So I hope the churches will continue in the ways that they seem to be realizing would be interesting now. I just want to show you very quickly one of the illustrations in this lavishly illustrated book, this book I did, where there is an insect. If the insects are there, it's because Calvin has very interesting things to say about insects, and how many Calvinists who are listening are aware of that. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Edouard. And it reminds me very much of Augustine's maxim that we love what we know, and needing to get to know all of our neighbors in the more than human world as well. Thank you so much. And for our last contributor, we would like to welcome Marieke van Duin to share a word about her contribution, Populism and Climate Change, a Depth Psychological Perspective. So welcome, Marieke.
Thank you, Chad. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizations that made both the ECOTHEE conferences and publications possible. So the WCC, the LWF, EC, and of course the OAC itself. And a special word of thanks, of course, to Lucas and to Tom, because I'm very well aware of the huge amount of work that you both did. So thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity to contribute to the conferences and also to this book. Just a few words because we're running late. I have been a member of the climate change working group of the World Council of Churches since 2000. So in that capacity, I observed many United Nations climate negotiations. The last one was in Glasgow just a couple of weeks ago. After some years, I became very concerned because I thought, why the hell is nothing happening? We all understand the big issue, but political leadership of most nations aren't doing anything. So I became very concerned and I wanted to have some answers. So I turned to the depth psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. I studied that for a number of years and I found very interesting answers. I will not go too deep into that, but just to show how my research relates to some of the things that have been said by previous speakers, especially David, when he talks about the rapid decrease of mitigation, I should say, of greenhouse gas emissions. We need that, we all know that, but it's not happening. And why? Because there is a lot of resistance in the rich societies. And in order to make real good climate policies, we need the constituency in our countries. And as we know that many populist movements are resisting those climate policies. They are climate deniers, they don't want to have anything to do with it, and they are afraid that they will lose their jobs and so forth. So what I did in my last research, and the article is in this publication, is try to find out why that is. Why is the populist movement growing so rapidly, and what are the underlying psychological mechanisms of that? And interestingly enough, that these mechanisms can be found in our rich capitalist societies themselves, because they're very materialistic. We are all very much used to advertising, to manipulation of consumers, and that manipulation leads to false identity formation. To put it very simply, very many people don't really develop their own true identity, but they are led into borrowed identities or false identities. You can only have a look at social media to know what I mean. People are following so-called strong leaders because they don't feel that strength in themselves. It is very dangerous to have large groups of the population not developing their own identity, because they cannot make their own choices then. They will just follow whatever is out there, fake news, false leaders, etc. So in order to have the right constituency for far-reaching climate policies, people need to understand the issues and they need to think for themselves. I will not go into details. I'll just give you that this research is ongoing. I am planning to do more research in other part topics. So I hope that I will be able to contribute to the next ECOTHEE as well. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Marika, thank you so much. And we look forward to you extending that research that's so valuable to call us to integrate our sense of being to that deep work, that psychological work even as part of our spiritual path. But we also echo your word of thanks and gratitude to Tom and to Luke for all the hard work of putting together this publication. And so just here before we come to a a short close, I just want to invite Luke in one more time just to make an announcement about the theme and calendar for ECOTHEE 2022. Luke.
Yes, thank you very much again, Chad and everyone. I just want to conclude that we look forward to welcoming you again in 2022 at the Orthodox Academy of Crete in Kolimbari. In October 26th to 29th, God willing, and with prayers that the health condition and situation will allow us to meet one to another and to be face to face, and also to have unlimited time to discuss during dinner, during breakfast, during prayer. It was just a wonderful experience, but we pray to be continued. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, everyone. From me, I'm very, very happy for this webinar and very blessed to see your faces. And I hope that you get the energy and also the prayers from every house in all over the world to continue our, I would say, divine work to make this world better and to praise the God creator. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you, Luke, and
thank
for
you.
this great word and this promise when we'll be able to extend this rich conversation when we're all back together again. Because unfortunately our time has come to a close now, and we just want to say how grateful we are for this rich discussion and for everyone who's contributed and for all who have joined this webinar to launch this ECOTHEE publication. And so for our hosts, our partners, the contributors, we thank you for this day and encourage you to find and use this book, and look forward to everyone's participation in the 7th ECOTHEE conference next year. And on behalf of all of us, just then to say a final thank you and prayer that God will bless you in our shared vocation to care for our common home. So peace be with you, friends.